Morning, Rebbe.
Good morning, everyone. How are you, Shmuel?
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Thank you, Rebbe, for getting all the material out so late at night and so early in the morning.
Yeah.
It's like you're in the military, Rebbe. It's very nice.
Baruch Hashem.
We have just a little quick announcement. Today is the yortzeit of Yaakov Leshin's father, Zelig ben Yehuda Leib. The Neshama should have an aliyah.
Amen. Zelig ben
Yehuda Leib.
Zelig ben Yehuda Leib. Neshama should have an aliyah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're back in Sefer Yeshaya. We need to do a little background review in order to be able to continue moving forward in Yeshaya. So let's give a little review. You have a handout, our famous sheet, the two sheets. The first sheet is the history of the Malchei Yehuda. The second sheet is the history, the chronology of the Malchei Yisrael. So we need to go back in time, just to review it, not because we want to go back in time, we want to go forward, but just to review it. After Shlomo HaMelech died, his son Rechavam became the king of the Jewish people. There was a machlokes about taxation. People felt he was taxing the country too much. His advisors told him not to continue taxing the country at that rate. He nevertheless persisted in taxing, and sort of a semi-revolution took place against Rechavam. The result of that is that another king was appointed at God's will, obviously. God told Achia Hashiloni to go anoint Yeravam ben Nevat to be the king over the northern kingdom. So unfortunately, the Jewish people became split into two kingdoms. The northern kingdom had 10 tribes, and Yeravam ben Nevat from Shevet Ephraim became king. And he's not supposed to be king, except that God told Achia Hashiloni, the Navi, to make him king. In order to be a king, you need to come from the Davidic dynasty. And what role he was supposed to play on a more permanent level is a great question that the Mefarshim deal with. At any rate, we now have, in the time of Rechavam, the son of Shlomo, two kings. The king of Yehuda, who is going to be the king over two tribes, Yehuda and Binyamin, basically in southern Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim and its environs. And the king, Yeravam ben Nevat, who is going to rule over the northern kingdom, and that would include Reuven, Gad, Chatzi Shevet, Menashe, who were what we call today Jordan, the Ava Layarden. As we mentioned in the Midos Shir early on, Yom Tif was coming up, the Gemara tells us, and Yeravam and the folks from up north had to come to Yerushalayim to be Ola Regel and bring Karbonis. Yeravam had a problem with this. Yeravam said, if I go to Yerushalayim with my people to offer Karbonis in the Beis HaMikdash, I will not be allowed to sit in the Azorah. For those who are learning Midos, we know what part of the Beis HaMikdash that is, the Azorah. You will not be able to sit in the Azorah because the halacha is Ein Yeshiva Ba'Azorah El Malchei Beis David Bilvad. Only a scion of the king, only a scion of the Davidic dynasty can sit in the Azorah, which means that when Yeravam, who is not a scion of the Davidic dynasty, would come to Yerushalayim in the Beis HaMikdash, he would have to stand in the Azorah like all the other Jews who are bringing Karbonis. But Rechavam, who's the son of Shlomo, he'd be able to sit in the Azorah. And this to Yeravam was very troubling because his people from up north would see this spectacle that Rechavam is sitting and Yeravam can, and they would conclude that Rechavam is the only real king, and Yerovam is not a king. After all, he can't even sit in the Azorah like Rechavam. And therefore, he didn't want Jews to go to Yerushalayim for Yontif, and he avoided this quote-unquote spectacle. In order to stop Jews from going to Yerushalayim, he erected two avodah zarahs, one in Beit El and one in Dan, on the roads leading to Yerushalayim. And slowly but surely, the northern kingdom unfortunately became steeped in avodah zarah. And so the northern kingdom now not only had its own king, they no longer came to the Beis Hamikdash to worship there. They now had, unfortunately, avodah zarah up north, and in the south there was the Davidic dynasty, which eventually has its own problems as well. So this is the part of history where we're in. There are two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. If we go to the sheet, on page 1 of the sheet, it has the chronology of all the malachim of Malchei Yehuda from the Davidic dynasty. And what we're going to be learning about today is king number 13, Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu is the king, and he becomes king in the year 3199, and he dies in the year 3228, which means he was king for 29 years. Chizkiyahu was a great tzaddik, and we're going to do a little review about that today as well. He was a great tzaddik, melech for 29 years. He begins his melucha in 3199. If you go to page 2, it says, Malchei Yisrael shemolchu al aseres hashvatim. These are the kings that ruled in the northern kingdom. They're called Malchei Yisrael, and the Davidic dynasty is called Malchei Yehuda. If you take a look, Malchei Yisrael, the first king is Yerovam ben Nevat. The 10 tribes went into exile. They were exiled by the Assyrian king Sancherib, who we'll learn about today as well, probably if we get, hopefully. Sancherib sent the 10 tribes into exile in the year 3205. If you take a look at the bottom of the second sheet, Malchei Yisrael, it says, Golus Aseres Hashvatim, the exile of the 10 tribes was in 3205. So in 3205, the northern part of Eretz Yisrael has now goyim that have been brought there. Sancherib was a Mavalbel people. He conquered the world, and he would bring people from other nations and mix them up. So he would bring foreigners to live in northern Eretz Yisrael, and he would take Jews and send them somewhere else. So he mixed everyone up, so nobody felt at home. Nobody felt comfortable. They all felt like strangers, which is how a person is supposed to feel when he's in Golus. Not supposed to feel comfortable in Golus. Supposed to feel uncomfortable. When it gets comfortable, you have a problem. So Sancherib destroyed the northern kingdom in 3205. If we go back to page 1, and we go to the 13th king who we're going to be discussing, Chizkiyahu, he became king in 3199. At the bottom of my page, I have my little handwritten notes. If the Shvatim, the 10 Shvatim went into Golus in 3205, and Chizkiyahu became king in 3199, that's a difference of 6 years, which means that at the point that Chizkiyahu became king in 3199, there was still a northern kingdom. It was teetering on the brink, but there was still a northern kingdom for 6 more years. In the 6th year of Chizkiyahu's reign over the south, Sancherib comes and destroys the northern kingdom. And that's going to be important for today. Sancherib came and destroyed the northern kingdom in the 6th year of Chizkiyahu's reign. Just to put ourselves again into the correct time period. Again, at the bottom of the page, I have my handwritten notes. The bottom of the first page shows the year on the left-hand side in bold, the year 3338. 3338 is the year that the southern kingdom was destroyed and the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. 3338. If the 10 tribes were sent into Golus, the northern kingdom was destroyed in 3205, and the southern kingdom was destroyed in 3338. That means there's a difference of 133 years. 3338 subtract 3205, you have 133 years, which means that even after the northern kingdom was destroyed, the southern kingdom remained under the Davidic dynasty for another 130 years, 33 years. So after Sancheriv destroyed the northern kingdom, the Beis Hamikdash and the Davidic dynasty continued to rule in the south for 133 more years. We do a little more math, and that's also my handwritten notes. Yeshayahu, the Sefer we're learning, Yeshayahu began his prophecy approximately 198 years before the Churban Beis Hamikdash. People mix together Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yecheskel. Yeshaya lived, and he lived, let's not talk about when he lived, let's talk about when he prophesied. When he started to prophesy, it was approximately 198 years before the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Yirmiyah lives during the Churban Beis Hamikdash, and Yecheskel lives during the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Yeshaya did not see Yirmiyah or Yecheskel as far as we know. Yeshaya was prophesying 198 years before the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. Yirmiyah and Yecheskel lived during the Churban Beis Hamikdash. So that's sort of the picture. Chizkiyahu, when he becomes king, there is still a northern kingdom. 6 years into his reign, the northern kingdom is destroyed by Sancheriv. 133 years before the first Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, the northern kingdom is destroyed by Sancheriv. Yeshaya prophesies about approximately 198 years before the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Okay. I'm turning to Perek Tes. We're going to read 2 psukim in Perek Tes. After Yeshaya prophesies about destruction, he says as following: Ki yeled yulad lanu, a child, talking about a young boy, a child has been born. Bei nitan lanu, a son has been given to us. Vatahi ha-misra al shichmo, this is Perek Tes, Pasuk Hey. Vatahi ha-misra al shichmo, and sovereignty will be on his shoulders. Vayikra Shemo, and his name is going to be called Pele Yoetz Kel Gibor Avi Ad Sar Shalom. That's a long name. The question is whether that's his name or whether those are adjectives that describe who this person is. At any rate, this pasuk is talking about Chizkiyahu. After Yeshayahu prophesies about destruction, he says, but there will be a child, and the child was already born. And he is going to be a Pelioid. He's going to be a tremendous chacham who's going to be able to give people unbelievably good advice. And he's going to be powerful. He's going to be like a father. He's going to be the Prince of Peace. Pasuk Vav, L'marbe ha-misra u'l'sholem ein kates, al kisei David v'al mamlachto, l'hachanosa u'l'sada b'mishpat u'v'tztaka mi'atavat olam. He'll once again sit on the throne of the Davidic dynasty, and he will set it to be a dynasty. He'll set his sovereignty, he'll set his kingdom to be mishpat and staka, justice and righteousness. The key here is for us today, which we spoke about when we learned Perek Tes. If you have a Navi in front of you, you'll be able to easily see it. In Pasuk Vav, it says, L'marbe ha-misra. He will have tremendous sovereignty. If you look at the art scroll, dominion will rest on his shoulder. He will have tremendous authority and tremendous sovereignty over the south. But we have a rule in Lashon Kodesh. We have a mem sofit and we have a regular mem. And the rule we all learned when we were in elementary school is when you're spelling a word and you need a mem in the middle, the beginning or the middle of a word, you use a regular mem. When you need a mem at the end of a word, you use a mem sofit. That's why it's called sofit, the end mem, the end of mem. If you take a look in your Tanakh, in your Sefer Yeshaya, Perek Tes, Pasuk Vav, L'marbei. L'marbei is spelled Lamed, Mem, Reish, Bei, Beis, Hey, which means the Mem is in the middle of the world. I can turn it around this way for a moment so you can see it. L'marbei. The issue is the L'marbei here is spelled with a mem sofit in the middle of a word. It doesn't belong there. It's supposed to be a regular mem. And you can see in brackets, the L'marbei, they spell it with an open mem. But that's for purposes of what we call reading it. But the spelling of this word correctly is Lamed Mem Sofit Reish Beis Hey. Why is there a mem sofit in the middle of a word? It's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be a regular mem. So this, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, Amar Rebbe Tanchum, Sanhedrin Daf Tzadik Daled, Amar Rebbe Tanchum, Dorish Bar Kapora, Bitzipoiri, Mipnei Makol Mem Shebe'emtza Teva Pasuach. Why is every mem in the middle of a word an open mem? V'zeh Sosel. And this mem in the middle of L'marbei is sealed. A mem, a regular mem has an opening in it. A mem sofit is locked on all four sides. So we call it sosel, locked, closed, or almost hidden. You can't get in there and you can't get out. Bikesh, the Gemara says, Rabbi Tanchum, in the name of Bar Kapora, Bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lasos Chizkiyo Mashiach V'Sancherev Gog Magog. The Rebbeinu Shalom's plan at that moment was to make Chizkiyahu a sign of the Davidic dynasty, Mashiach ben David. Chizkiyahu, because he was such a great tzaddik, the Rebbeinu Shalom was going to make him Mashiach. And the Mashiach period was going to be ushered in by Chizkiyahu. But we know that whether it's right before or right after, irrelevant for our discussion right now, there's going to be a war called the War of Gog and Magog. And that war of Gog and Magog that Navi Yeshaya speaks about, and we read it in the Haftorah on Shabbos Chol Hamoed, Shabbos Chol Hamoed Sukkos. It says that the nations of the world will come to wage war on Yerushalayim. So everything is in place. Chizkiyahu is a sign of the Davidic dynasty. He is a tremendous tzaddik. Sancherev, we're moving forward into history. Sancherev has destroyed the northern kingdom, and he's coming down towards Yerushalayim to conquer Yerushalayim, which is what we're going to learn about soon. He comes down to conquer Yerushalayim, so all the chess pieces are in place. There's going to be a war, looks like. There's going to be a war to conquer Jerusalem. That can take the historical, that can be the historical Gog and Magog war. We have a tremendous tzaddik who's a sign of the Davidic dynasty ruling in Jerusalem, Chizkiyahu. So Rebbeinu Shalom says, all the pieces are in place, and I can make this Chizkiyahu Mashiach, and I can make the war that's about to happen Gog and Magog. Amr Midas Hadin Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribbono Shalom. So the Midas Hadin in heaven, we spoke about this last week or 2 weeks ago in the Das Tavuno Shir. This is the way God runs the world in heaven. He has a heavenly court for reasons we discussed in the Das Tavuno Shir. He has a heavenly court. And the Midas Hadin upstairs says to Ribbono Shalom, I don't think you should do that. Uma David Melech Yisrael she'oma kama shiros v'sishbachos lefanecha lo asisa Mashiach. Chizkiyo shenasis lo kol anisam halol lo oma shir lefanecha taseu Mashiach. So the Midas Hadin said to Ribbono Shalom, Chizkiyahu had so many miracles done for him, including the fact that right now, historically, Chizkiyo was about to die. We'll get to that in a moment. He was very sick and he was about to die. And a miracle occurred, and the Ribbono Shalom sent him a refuah shalema. The Ribbono Shalom should send a refuah shalema to all the sick Yidden in the world, and all the sick good people in the world. And the Ribbono Shalom made a miracle and cured Chizkiyo. He healed Chizkiyo. As Chizkiyo didn't say Shira Takadosh Baruch Hu. He didn't sing Takadosh Baruch Hu. So the Midas Hadin said, Ribbono Shalom, Chizkiyo has a Zayd that his name was David. Whenever David was saved, David wrote a shtickle Tehillim. He wrote a kapitel Tehillim. And he didn't make David Mashiach. So why would you make a great-great-grandchild Mashiach who you've done miracles for, and he doesn't say Shiras v'sishbachos to you? Why would you make him Mashiach? The Gemara continues and says how that dialogue continued. But at any rate, the conclusion of the dialogue is that the Ribbono Shalom said, we're going to leave things as they are for now. Chizkiyo will not be Mashiach. And therefore, the mem in Lamarbe HaMisra, a tremendous amount of sovereignty, it could have had an open mem in it, because that sovereignty would have been the sovereignty of Melech HaMashiach, wide open, complete sovereignty. Marbe, tremendous amount of sovereignty. The Melech HaMashiach's kind of sovereignty, and Chizkiyo could have had it. But the moment of opportunity was lost. As they say, you have a window of opportunity, and then the window closes and the opportunity's gone. And so the open mem in the middle of Lamarbe got closed. The opportunity was closed. The window got closed. It was sasum, and that plan did not come to fruition. Chizkiyo was not Mashiach, and Sancheriv coming to Yerushalayim was not Milchemes Gog Umogog. In that context, let us remind ourselves of the Gemara in Brachos and Daf Yud. Before we go into the Gemara in Brachos, I have to remind everybody, remember, we've learned much of these events in Sefer Malachim. Malachim Aleph and Malachim Beis are dedicated to brief summaries of every king of the Davidic dynasty and every king of the Malchei Yisrael. It has the history, brief history of every king who was king in the north and every king who was king in the south. But we don't know the full story. So in fact, the story of Chizkiyo is already in Malachim Beis, where it discusses that he was sick and about to die. But we don't have the full story of Yeshayahu's interaction with those kings. That's left for Sefer Yeshaya. So there are parts in Sefer Yeshaya where events that we already learned about in Sefer Malachim have already been discussed, but we didn't know that Yeshaya was on stage as well. We only knew about the king and certain things a specific king did, but we didn't know that Yeshaya was on that stage as well because he wasn't the focus. The focus was a summary of kings. Now we come to Sefer Yeshaya, and we're going back to certain events in Sefer Malachim, and now we're learning about what Yeshaya did or said during those events that we already learned about in Sefer Malachim. So in Sefer Malachim, it says, in Malachim Beis, Perek Chof, the Gemara now in Brachos Daf Yud, Bayom Hahem Chola Chizkiyo Lomos, in those days, which are right now, the time of Sancheriv coming to Yerushalayim, Chola Chizkiyo Lomos. Chizkiyo got very sick and he was about to die. Vayovo Elav Yeshayahu ben Ometz Hanavi, Yeshaya came to Chizkiyahu and said, Ko ama Hashem tzav lebeisa ki meis ata v'lo sechaya. Write your will. You need to write a will because you're going to die and you will not live. Ki meis ata, you are going to die v'lo sechaya, and you will not live. Now that seems superfluous. You're going to die and not live. The Gemara says, "My ki meis ata v'lo sechya, meis ata ba'olam hazeh v'lo sechya l'olam haba." Chizkiyahu, as great a tzaddik as you are, and as great a Talmud Chacham as you are, was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He reinstituted the learning of Torah in the South in a way that hadn't been known for many, many years. But you're going to die, and you will not live. You're going to die in this world from this sickness, and you lost your share in Olam Haba. Amalek, so Chizkiyahu said to Yeshaya, "My kulihai, what is this about? What did I do? If everybody dies, never, and if I have to die, if this is what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants, that's obviously what's going to happen. But what happened to my Olam Haba?" Amalei, so Yeshaya said to him, Mishum lo asakta b'pirya v'rivya. Yeshaya said, you didn't get married. You weren't osik in the midst of pirya v'rivya. You have no children, and therefore you lost your Olam Haba. We're not going to get into the question that we originally asked when we learned Malachim Beis. Why would a person lose all his Olam Haba because he didn't have children? There's a mitzvah in the Torah of pirya v'rivya. But it's not a mitzvah that we think about and we say, if you don't do the mitzvah period of review, no matter what you did in your life, you have no olam haba. A separate question. But that's what Yeshayahu told Chizkiyahu. Amalei, so Chizkiyahu says to Yeshaya, I'll tell you why I didn't get married and I have no children. Rishum dechazoyli bruach hakodesh tenafkemini benin deloy malu. I saw in Ruach HaKodesh that if I get married and have children, I'm going to have evil children. They're going to be Rishayim. And therefore, to avoid bringing Rishayim into the world, I decided not to get married. Amalei, so Yeshayahu Hanavi said to Chizkiyahu, a very famous phrase in Shas, Bahadikavshe derachmana lo malach. Why are you getting involved in God's secrets? That's none of your business. We say this many times in the shir. It's not your business. People have jobs to do. They have things they need to do for Hashem. They have things that they need to do al pi Torah mitzvahs. And it's not your business to make cheshbonos. There are times where people have to make certain cheshbonos, like we talked about last week, life and death. Should I do this mitzvah if it'll cause my death? There are only few exceptions to that. Otherwise, we say v'chai bahem v'lo sheyomus bahem. You're supposed to live, not die. But why are you getting involved in God's plans and God's secrets? You have a mitzvah of pruavu. You get married. And whatever's going to happen will happen. That's up to God's plan, universal plan. You can't say I'm not doing a mitzvah because I see in the future, my Ruach HaKodesh, that two evil children will come. What you're supposed to do, you do. And what God thinks is appropriate to do, he'll do. Amalei, so Chizkiyahu said to Yeshaya, okay, fine. Hashta hafli baratech, efshe de gomes husadi dividi dach, v'nafke minai benin damalu. Gavaldik. Yeshaya, you're giving me this musa that I have to get married and have children. I know that you have a single daughter. Give me your daughter as my wife, and that way maybe we can avoid this gezerah of evil children. My zechusim, your zechusim, into this shidduch with your daughter, and maybe we can avoid these two children being Rishayim. Amalek, so Yeshaya said to Chizkiyahu, Kvar nigzro lecha gezerah. It's too late. There's a decree that you're going to die. There's nothing to do. I'm not giving you my daughter. It's a waste of time. Amalei, so Chizkiyahu said to Yeshaya, Ben Amotz. Yeshaya was Yeshaya Ben Amotz. His father's name was Amotz. So Chizkiyahu says, Ben Amotz, listen. Kalei nevuascha, stop prophesizing for me. I'm not interested in hearing any more of your prophecies. V'tzei, and leave my palace. Kach mekublani mi beis abi abba. Afilu cher chadam munachas al tzavori shalodam al yimna atzmi min arachamim. I have a Kabbalah from my elder Zayda. I come from David HaMelech, Hiskio says. And in my family, we have a different Kabbalah. We never say to someone, there's a decree, and just lay in bed and die. I'm a scion of the Davidic dynasty, and we've been taught differently. Even if there's a sword on a person's neck, you continue to pray to God. David HaMelech taught us that Tehillim is a way to reach the Ribono Shel Olam, even when there's a Gzeira. Do not tell me roll over in bed and die because there's already a decree. Leave my palace. I have a Messiah from my Zayda David that I can still be mispal. The Gemara then tells us that Chizkiyahu did daven, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a nes, and Chizkiyahu lived. He did not die from that sickness. Eventually, Yeshaya does give his single daughter to Chizkiyahu as a wife, and from that marriage, unfortunately, came out two Rishoyim, Rav Sheka and Menashe. If you take a look at your sheet, page 1, Malchei Yehuda, you see that King 13 is Chizkiyahu, King 14 is Chizkiyahu's son Menashe. Very, very big Russia. He do tshuva at the end of his life or not, discussion of Masechta Sanhedrin. But these two children, in fact, were born, and this Tatala named Menashe, he actually kills his grandfather. Remember, Chizkiyahu marries Yeshaya's daughter. Menashe is Chizkiyahu's son, and this Menashe kills his mother's father, his Zayd. He kills Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu was killed by Menashe. Okay, so that's the basic background we're dealing with. Sancheriv has come down from the north and conquered the north. He's about to come to Yerushalayim and conquer Yerushalayim. Chizkiyahu was just in the midst. It looks like it was the third day when he was sick, going back to Malachim. And a miracle happened, and he was healed. And instead of saying Shira, for whatever reason, we studied that when we learned Malachim, he did not say Shira to God. So whereas, had he said Shira to the Ribono Shel Olam, he could have been Mashiach. His neshama would have been the neshama. It was the neshama of Mashiach, but he didn't. It was potentially Mashiach, but didn't come to fruition. And Sancheriv coming down to Yerushalayim would have been Gog Magog. That didn't happen, and therefore in Perek Tes, Lamar Bey, that mem is sealed because that window of opportunity was gone. And that's where we're up to right now. Sancheriv coming down to Yerushalayim. And that is Yeshaya Perek Yud. Pasuk Lamed Beis. If you're in the art scroll, it's page 94. And it begins, the end of Perek Yud, Od Hayom Benov Lamod. If those words sound familiar, that's okay. That's good. Because this is the Haftorah of the 8th day of Pesach. We don't know about 8 days of Pesach anymore. Pesach is 7 days. There's an 8th day in Chutz La'aretz. And this is the Haftorah of the 8th day of Pesach in Chutz La'aretz. Od Hayom Benov, Mashiach's Haftorah. Od Hayom Benov Lamo. It was on that day that Sancheriv stood with his army. He has an army of 185,000 soldiers. We learned that in Sefer Malachim, where this event is transcribed. He had 185,000, maybe more soldiers, but it seems to be that the description he had 185,000 sort of sergeants and officers. Who knows how many soldiers he actually had. But let's just use the number 185,000. And he's in the city of Nov, which if we go back a little and we can remember Nov Ir HaKohanim, it's a city that's near Yerushalayim. And Sancheriv is there with his army, and he can already see Yerushalayim. Od Hayom Benov Lamod. Yinofef Yado Har Bas Tzion Givat Yerushalayim. And he waves his hand, the Odd Scroll says, contemptuously. He looks at Yerushalayim and he says to his army, wow, I thought Yerushalayim was some kind of huge fortified city. We've been doing battle the whole day, coming down from the north to the south. Everyone's tired. Why don't we get a good night's sleep? This is going to be a real easy city to conquer. We can do it tomorrow morning. Everybody go to sleep. That was a big mistake. The Art Scroll comments on page 95 in Pasuk 32. The prophet mocks, Yeshaya mocks the Syrian king Sanherib, for his astrologers had advised him that he would be victorious only if he attacked Jerusalem on that day. The astrologers that Sanherib listened to told him, this is the day that you can attack and be victorious over Yerushalayim. And he didn't listen to them. He said, it's a small city, this is nonsense, I can do it tomorrow, everybody go to sleep. Hine ha'adam pasik lamed gimel. Hine ha'adam Hashem tzavakos miso'ef pura b'maratza. Behold, Hashem will chop off branches with an axe. He's comparing this huge army to huge trees. And the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to take an axe and chop down all these trees, meaning he's going to chop down all these soldiers. V'ramei hakoa giduim. Those of lofty stature will be severed. V'hagvoim yishbolu. And the haughty ones, the army of Sanherib and Sanherib, will be brought low. Pasuk Yud Aleph, Pasuk Lamed Dalet. V'nikaf sivchei hayar b'bazel. Forest thickets will be hewn by iron. Again, this is a mashal. There's a great army with great trees, great sergeants, and great weapons. They'll all be struck down. V'halavanon ba'adir yipol. And the Lebanon will fall by a mighty one. The Art Scroll comments on page 95. Lebanon is the name of a forest near Jerusalem and represents the massive Assyrian army that will be struck down by the angel. What happens is the army goes to sleep at night. And as we know, Malachim say Shira during the night. We cannot hear the Malachim saying Shira, and we don't want to hear the Malachim saying Shira because that would cause a person to die. But the Rebbeinu Shalom performed another miracle. He opened the ears of the Assyrian soldiers, and they were able to hear the Malachim saying Shiva, the Gemara tells us. Medrash tells us. And when they heard this, they all died in their sleep. 185,000 soldiers just died in their sleep. The next morning, the whole army was dead. Chizkiyahu never got out of his bed. No war was fought. They died in their sleep. Now we know that there are certain things that we can hear and certain things that we can't hear. People that own dogs have something called a dog whistle. You blow into the whistle, a human being can't hear it. A dog can hear it because he has a certain level of sensitivity in his ears that we do not have. So we don't have that sensitivity, and Baruch Hashem, to hear Malachim saying Shiva. But the Rebbeinu Shalom opened the eardrums or whatever part of the ear he had to open up so that this army heard the Shira and they died in their sleep. Now we're up to chapter 11, the chapter of Mashiach. V'yotza choter migeza Yishai, v'neitze misharashav yifre. A staff will grow from the stump of Yishai, David ben Yishai, and a shoot will sprout from his roots. So the question is, what's the connect? Why are we getting now Mashiach's Haftorah, the Haftorah of Mashiach? Why is this coming off the defeat and miracle over Sanherib's army? What's the connection between the last chapter of the death of all these Assyrian soldiers and Mashiach? So there are many answers to this question. First answer is that in the last chapter, at the end of the last chapter, this great army was compared to huge, powerful trees, well-rooted trees. And God came and performed a miracle and cut down these magnificent, powerful trees. But yet, there's a tiny little shoot, there's a tiny little stump of a tree. And this little tiny stump of a tree is called Malchus Beis David. It's right now only governing the southern part of the kingdom. The north has been destroyed by Sancherib's big trees. But those big trees of Sancherib are now dead. And this little kingdom in the south, which is like a stump of a tree, that stump of a tree is going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it's going to be the Melech HaMashiach that's going to take the sovereignty of the whole world. So it's sort of like a contradistinction. At the end of the last chapter, this great army that's compared to this great forest will be chopped down. And this little stump of a tree that's left in southern Eretz Yisrael in Yerushalayim, from that stump will grow a magnificent, powerful tree, Melech HaMashiach, and he will be the true sovereign over the world. The other shot is that we mentioned that Chizkiyahu had the opportunity to be Mashiach, and that opportunity was lost when he didn't say Shira over the miracle. And now that this miracle was done for him, and the army of Yeshaya, the army of Sancherib died, so the discussion now continues about the Melech HaMashiach, who Chizkiyahu could have been, and unfortunately the opportunity was shut. So now Yeshaya prophesies about the Mashiach that is coming from Hev Yameinu. The last year we had, I believe, before Purim, we talked about the Radak, and that's what I'd like to talk about again today to remind everybody, because it's such a beautiful Radak. It gives us so much chizuk, especially in this time. What is the connection between the end of chapter 10 in Yeshaya, the fall of the 185,000 soldiers of Sancherib, and Perek 11, chapter 11, which talks about the prophecy of Mashiach? So we already mentioned reason one, the big trees got cut down, the little stump is going to become Melech HaMashiach and rule the world. Second reason is because Chizkiyahu had an opportunity to be Mashiach, and he lost that opportunity, and now we pick up again with the concept of Mashiach. And now the Radak on page 96, second column, Radak, Pasuk Aleph. V'yotza choter, a stump will come out, a staff will grow from the stump of Yishai. V'yotza choter. Samach parsha zu shi'asidli mos HaMashiach. This chapter is next to the previous chapter because, first of all, this chapter 11, we need to understand is talking about the days of Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, from Hev Yameinu. Chapter 11 is about Mashiach coming and what Mashiach, how Mashiach will make the world a finer, better place. It will be a world of peace. It'll be a world of respect. It'll be a world of morality. That's the world we're looking to, and I keep on saying over and over, as we continue to be mispalel, we should be mispalel for the world to be a better world. We don't want to go back to the world that was. We don't want to go back to that world. There was a lot of things wrong with that world. We want to go back to the real Chadesh Yameinu Kekedim. When we say Chadesh Yameinu Kekedim, we say Rabbanu Shalom, renew the days of old. We're not talking about the days of 2019 before Corona. We're talking about Chadesh Yameinu Kekedim of the first Beis Hamikdash, with the Shlomo HaMelech ruling the world, and all the nations of the world brought karbonis in a peaceful way to Yerushalayim. That's the Chadesh Yameinu Kekedim. That's the world we want to go back to. That's not the world that people think about many times. I want to get back to normal. There is no back to normal. You can't go back to normal because it wasn't normal when what you're thinking about wasn't normal. So chapter 11 talks about the Yemos HaMashiach. Lahavtocha shehoiser mechizkiyo, Amma. And therefore Yeshaya says the prophecies one after another. Al tismahu al pella godlu kazeh sheyasa b'mei Chizkiyo b'mapelas machne asher kurega eichad. Yeshaya is telling us, don't be shocked at the story Lubling just told you, that in their sleep, 185,000 Assyrian soldiers or Assyrian officers died. That's unbelievable. Chizkiyo didn't even get out of bed. The Jewish army didn't even take up arms. The entire Syrian army died in their sleep as they encamped around Yerushalayim. Wow, that's an unbelievable miracle that Lubling just described. And the Radak says, you think that's something? I'm going to tell you something else. There's going to be a bigger miracle that's going to happen for the Jewish people when Mashiach comes, in the times of Mashiach. What's this great? What can be greater than 185,000 soldiers dying in their sleep? The Radak wrote this, and Yeshaya prophesied about it long before the Radak. But this is a prophecy of a miracle that's greater than the death of 185,000 soldiers in their sleep, and that's kibbutz goliath. The fact that after so many years, Jews will head back home and come to Eretz Yisrael, that is a bigger miracle than 185,000 soldiers dying in their sleep. And that's why these two prophecies are linked together. In the last chapter, in chapter 10, we're taught about 185,000 soldiers dying in their sleep to protect Yerushalayim and Chizkiyo the Tzaddik. And you say to yourself, wow, what a miracle at the end of chapter 10. Unbelievable miracle. I'm going to go tell all my friends what God did for Chizkiyo and the Jewish people in the time of Sancheriv. It's unbelievable. Yeshaya then prophesied and says, take it easy. I want to tell you about a bigger miracle. A bigger miracle. I want to tell you that in the days of Mashiach, there's going to be a kibbutz goliath, where Jews, and now it's almost 2,000 years, where Jews are going to come back to Eretz Yisrael. And that's a greater miracle than 185,000 soldiers dying in their sleep. And this, the Melech HaMashiach, is going to come from, obviously, Chizkiyo. He's from the Davidic dynasty. So the kibbutz goliath that we witness is an amazing miracle, and we all know what that miracle is because we live it. We went through our own trials and tribulations and our own thought processes. Should we, shouldn't we? Is it right? Is it wrong? We had all the kinds of thoughts. Yes, do it, don't do it. 5 years, do it when the children are married, do it when I have a job. It's not the right time, it is the right time. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. For most of us, this is before Nefesh B'Nefesh, and you had to go through all that paperwork and back and forth until you finally got here, and then your lift got here, and then your apartment wasn't ready. And you heard all these stories in Chutz La'aretz. You say, should I, shouldn't I, maybe yes, maybe no. And when you live in Golus for almost 2,000 years, as we said at the beginning of this year, Golus unfortunately could become a normal thing. It becomes a way of life. And it's abnormal to leave what you become accustomed to and go to Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound normal. My children are here. I've been here. It's my culture. My friends are here. My family is here. Reb Chaim Volozhin, in his Ruach Chaim, in his explanation to Pirkei Avos, says that the first time Avram Avinu is mentioned in Perek K of Pirkei Avos, it doesn't say Avinu. It just says Avram. It says there were 10 doros from Adam till Noach and 10 doros from Noach to Avram. But Avram is not there described as Avram Avinu. It just says 10 doros from Noach to Avram. The following Mishnah says Avram Avinu was tested with 10 challenges, the Asara Nisyonos. And all of a sudden, in that Mishnah, Avram Avinu gets the name Avinu. And Reb Chaim Volozhin asked why in the Mishnah before that is he not called Avinu? The Mishnah should have said there were 10 generations from Adam till Noach and 10 generations from Noach till Avram Avinu. So Reb Chaim Volozhin says as follows. The first Mishnah is talking just about a historical fact. There are 10 generations from Noach, from Adam to Noach, and 10 generations from Noach to Avram, period. The next Mishnah makes Avram our father. Why? because Avram went through the 10 Nisyonos to create a whole new gene pool of people. Every time Avram passed a Nisayon, he didn't do it for himself. He went through these difficult challenges to create a stronger gene pool of people who will be his offspring that can withstand those 10 Nisyonos in their own lifetime. And many Sforim say that every Jew on one level or another faces the same 10 Nisyonos that Avram Avinu faced. And Rav Chaim Volozhin gives an example. He says, how is it possible? Now, Rav Chaim Volozhin's writing in the late 1700s, maybe early 1800s. Late 1700s, early 1800s. He's writing over 200, 230 years ago, 240 years ago. He says, I'll give you an example. We know that Reb Chaim Volozhin was the Talmud Muvak of the Vilna Gaon, and the Vilna Gaon encouraged his students to go to Eretz Yisrael. They made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. And that's why there's a mass amount of Talmidei Gra that went to Eretz Yisrael. And Ad Hayom, there are so many shuls that follow the Minig HaGra here in Eretz Yisrael, because that's a Masorah from the Talmidei HaGra that came to Eretz Yisrael. And of course, Talmidei Baal Shem Tov also came to Eretz Yisrael. So Reb Chaim Volozhin was very familiar with the idea of going to Eretz Yisrael. Reb Chaim Volozhin writes, how do people get the courage, the strength, to leave everything behind and to go to Eretz Yisrael? How do you do that? So he answers this question in the late 1700s, early 1800s by saying because of Avraham Avinu. Because Avraham Avinu, one of his 10 challenges, one of his 10 tests, one of his 10 nisyonos was, Lech lecha me'artzecha mi'moladetcha mi'beis avicha el ha'oretz ashareka. Leave your culture, leave your birthland, leave it all behind. I want you to go to Eretz Canaan. And Avraham Avinu heard the voice. He took the challenge and he went to Eretz Canaan. And therefore, Avraham Avinu created a gene pool in which people, if they dig deep enough inside themselves, they can pull up Avraham Avinu's strength and do the Lech Lecha in their own lives. And this is kibbutz golius. It requires digging deep down into a person's kishkis and revealing that he's a descendant of, or she is a descendant of Avraham Avinu and Sarah. And they did it, and they empowered me to do it, and I can do this. And the idea that a person can actually do this is a miracle. And the Radak says a person garnering the strength to leave everything behind and say, I am going back home after 2,000 years because I recognize that wherever I am, whether it's New York, New Jersey, London, doesn't make a difference. France, Africa, doesn't make a difference. I'm in Golis. I don't want to be in Golis. I want to go back home. Golis is a state of homelessness. The fact that people can have fancy roofs and fancy houses all over the world doesn't mean that they're not homeless. These people are homeless, unfortunately. And the bigger misfortune is they believe that they have an actual home. And that's something that Sukkot teaches us about, leaving your home and going into a temporary dwelling. But people need to have their mindset, and that's a miracle. If you think, the Radak says, that 185,000 Assyrian soldiers dying in their sleep is a miracle, as told at the end of chapter 10 of Yeshaya, Yeshaya says, I got something to tell you. Because in chapter 11, I'm going to prophesize about kibbutz golius, the Radak says, and the idea that so many Jews would readjust their attitude, would readjust their lives in such a way to go back through kibbutz golius is a bigger miracle than 185,000 soldiers dying in the middle of the night. So if we were going to come up with a bumper sticker for Aliyah or a poster for Aliyah, there are a lot of things you can say about making Aliyah. You can say, live a miracle. Come join us in the miracle of kibbutz golius. But as we mentioned, I believe last week on Yom HaAtzmaut, the real bumper sticker here, at least for the Radak, is come be a miracle. Don't join a miracle. You come to Eretz Yisrael, you become a miracle. You're not living a miracle. Your existence is a miracle existence. It's a miracle that people can actually retrain their ideas and their concepts to come back here. And congratulations. that you now are a miracle. You're not a regular person like you used to be in Chutz La'aretz. You are a miracle. Lahavdil, there are physical miracles. You read these stories. I read a story a few days ago that a woman, she's 104 years old with all kinds of underlying conditions, and she developed coronavirus. She was in the hospital, respirator or ventilator, the whole thing, and they were sure she was going to die. They interviewed her two daughters. One of her daughters is almost 78. They interviewed her daughters, and they said, yeah, we came to look at her through the window, and she couldn't even talk. She didn't even know we were there. And she left the hospital. God saved one of his creatures. God saved one of his human beings. God saved a good person. But that's a miracle. This woman is a miracle. Whoever looks at this person says, you are a miracle. Why is she a miracle? Because she walked out of a hospital room at the age of 104 after suffering coronavirus with underlying conditions. She walked out of the room. People look at her and say, that woman's a miracle. She's a walking miracle because she was physically saved. The same thing is true for spiritual miracles. Every one of us walking down the street looking at each other, we should understand that each of us is a miracle. You're looking at a spiritual miracle. Why, how, and what overcame us that we came here, and it was a miracle. So as we look at each other, there's a new respect that we should have for each other. And that's the respect that we would have looking at a miracle. If this 104-year-old lady was walking down the street and you knew her story, you would stop and tap your husband or wife on the shoulder. You'd say, I want to tell you something. You know who that is? She's 104. She had coronavirus. She has underlying conditions. She walked out of the hospital. It's a miracle. She's a walking miracle. When we walk down the streets, you look at each other and say, these are walking miracles here. How did these people get here? They got here through kibbutz golius. You walk down the street, you see all these building cranes building more and more apartments for more and more people coming here. You're looking at a miracle. These are all miracles that Yeshaya prophesied about, and we'll take a look more in depth next week. But these are miracles. We're all living a miracle. We all are miracles that we're here. We live the miracle of being protected here by the Ribono Shel Olam. The Ribono Shel Olam continues to protect us here, the safest place in the world, as now the world has even admitted. And the miracle that we are is even a greater miracle than 185,000 soldiers dying in their sleep. Don't take yourselves for granted. Don't take what you did for granted. Doesn't mean you have to wake up every morning, pat yourself on the back and say, I'm a great miracle. But you have to have some appreciation, a great appreciation for yourselves and for the others who have made this great sacrifice. And it's a mental sacrifice. It's a mental sacrifice. And I'll end with this for this part of the shir. We drink 4 kosas on Pesach at night. We know that that's for the 4 words of Geula. There are actually 5 kosos. The Maral drinks 5 kosos because there are 5 lashonos of Geula. The question about the 5th kos is not our subject right now. The Maral in his Haggadah, though, has a part of the Haggadah is you drink the 5th kos. At any rate, each one of the kosos is for a word that God said about taking the Jews out of Egypt. V'hotzeisi, I will take them out. V'hitzalti, I will save them. V'ga'alti, I will redeem them. V'lakachti, I will take them to be my people. And the 5th word, v'hevesi, I will bring them to Eretz Yisrael. But the first word of Geula is v'hotzeisi, I will take them out. Now, you would think that v'hotzeisi means I will take them out of Mitzrayim. The pasuk itself says, "V'hotzeisi eschem mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim." I will remove you from the sivlos of Mitzrayim. The common interpretation of sivlos is the heavy burden, the heavy work. I will take you out from the heavy work of Mitzrayim. The Chidush Yarim is quoted as having said, the first Gerer Rebbe is quoted as having it said, sivlos, the root of the word sivlos is sevel, patience, tolerance, savlanot. God says, the first miracle I need to perform to take you out of Mitzrayim is to take the tolerance and the patience out. I got to rip out the patience and the tolerance from you. The Jews were in Mitzrayim for 210 years, and as much as they suffered in Mitzrayim, it became like a normal. Yeah, we wake up in the morning in Mitzrayim, we're slaves, we work. And how many times after they left Mitzrayim, they said, oh, let's go back. Remember, we got free fish in Mitzrayim. Let's go back. Leaving Golus and ripping the Golus out of the Yid is an S. And so the Chedush Yerim says that the very first word God utters about taking Jews out of Mitzrayim is Votzesius Nemitachas Sivlos Mitzrayim. I'm going to take you out of being patient in Mitzrayim. If you want to leave Mitzrayim, you got to stop being patient about it. You have to stop being passionate about it. You can't say, it's okay, I can deal with this Golus thing. There's a man on a white donkey that's coming by. Eventually, I'll get on the donkey, I'll get on that lalo when the time comes. There may not be open skies to come. You have to have the passion to come. You cannot wait. That is the problem of Sivlos Mitzrayim. I can tolerate the situation. In fact, I'm happy with it. I have a good job. I have a summer home and a regular home. I have 3 cars. I'm pretty happy here. And let Mashiach come and tell me I need to change things, the way I live. God, the first thing God has to do is perform a miracle. Open the minds, the hearts, the eyes of Jews and rip out the Golus mentality. You are not home. You are homeless. And that's the first step to being able to leave Mitzrayim. The passion to want to change the way you think, the passion to want to change the way you live. And then you come to Eretz Yisrael, and you are a miracle, no less than and much greater than the 104-year-old woman with underlying conditions who walks out of the hospital post-coronavirus. So if we're going to talk to our friends in Chutz La'aretz, come to Eretz Yisrael. Don't join the miracle. Don't live a miracle. Come to Eretz Yisrael. You become a miracle. Okay.